"Come on," she whispered to herself with fervor, as though she could will the guardian's unfeeling face to come back through the door. Funny, she'd feared him at first. Now all she feared was his absence. Unfortunately, her guardian did not obey her silent pleas, and in the accusatory silence of the hall, all thoughts whittled down to one. Either something had gone wrong with the transfer, or something was wrong with her. If it was the transfer, all she needed to do was wait patiently for her summons. If it were her... Almost without thinking, Layden found herself standing. Murmurs and gasps rang out from the crowd and those around her on the benches. Someone whispered her name, a cautious warning, but she didn't turn to see who it was. She couldn't. Nothing else mattered now but getting through that door. Her entire life had led to this moment. She was ready. Ready for the transfer, ready for the trials. No one would stop her. She wouldn't let them. Layden exited the row and crossed to the door as confidently as her trembling limbs would allow. Manny's face swam before her mind's eye. He'd walked these steps not a half hour ago, stiff and rigid with nerves. If only he were here now, to cock his head and give her his one-sided smile. He'd know if she was doing the right thing. But he was already through the door and onto his next assignment. And anyway, not even he'd boasted the steeliness of resolve their years of preparation had promised them. Layden's shaking fingers connected with the cold brass handle, the rich oak of the door smelling overpoweringly like treated wood. The door was heavy and did not pull from the frame easily, but Layden was determined, throwing the whole weight of her small body back to wrench it open. This was it. She was ready. Or, that's what she thought. Unfortunately, no amount of calculation, courage, or resolve could have prepared her for the scene awaiting her on the other side. Her new guardian stood in the middle of the room, his arms around the shoulders of another woman. She was elderly, in her 70s at least, rail-thin, but embracing him strongly in return. She was crying. A lot. His hand cradled her head to his chest, his face lowered to her hair, filled with compassion, maybe even anguish. Layden moved into the room and closed the door behind her, instinctively feeling like she should hide what was happening from the people beyond. But what exactly was happening? The whole thing was largely out of character for the day. This wasn't some detached scene of resolved fate and duty. It was charged with all the emotions for which they'd been told there was no room. And while she hadn't even met her new guardian yet, she couldn't understand what he'd be doing in a situation like this. As Layden stood there, searching for understanding, one thing became clear. This moment had been private, and she'd grossly intruded on it. The heat drained from her cheeks as she realized what a mistake she'd made. But she couldn't move. The pit in her stomach had turned cold and frozen over. Both the woman and the guardian broke apart as soon as they noticed Layden, the guardian's expression immediately returning to stone. Though perhaps it had always been. Perhaps she'd imagined such compassion, for no trace of it was left. She couldn't even envision it back.